8 rare Mongolian horses have been released in northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region.
Extinction has wiped out countless species, and the Przewalski's horse was almost one of them.
The Mongolian wild horse, also known as the Przewalski's horse, is the only surviving wild horse breed on Earth.
With its stocky build, upright mane, and striped legs, this wild horse once roamed freely before disappearing from the wild. But in a bold and unexpected move, China released a group of them into one of its harshest deserts.
We managed to get those horses here alive and healthy all the way to this reintroduction center.
What happened next shocked even the scientists behind the plan. Join us in the story of the wild comeback of the Przewalski's horse. The forgotten Przewalski's horse. There was a time when people thought the Przewalski's horse was gone forever. This wild horse, native to Central Asia, had once roamed freely across deserts and grasslands for thousands of years. It had survived through harsh climates and changing landscapes, always wild, never truly tamed.
They don't need us. They are independent, happy to be independent.
But by the mid-1900s, that history came to a halt. In 1969, scientists officially declared the Przewalski's horse extinct in the wild. Not a single one could be found living free anywhere on Earth. The only ones left were a small number kept in zoos and special breeding programs in a few different countries. These last survivors represented the final threads of a species that had once galloped alongside mammoths and early humans. And even those few horses were in serious trouble. With such a small population, every individual became critical to the future of the species. How did it get this bad? It wasn't one thing. It was a mix of pressures. As human populations expanded across Asia, they began building farms and settlements in the same regions where these horses once thrived. Their habitats shrank. They were hunted. Their food sources disappeared. And while a few were captured and kept in captivity, most of the wild herds didn't survive the changes. Their numbers dropped steadily until there were none left outside of zoos. For many years, the Przewalski's horse faded from public memory. People didn't expect it to come back.
These are the last known truly wild horses, as in they're not domesticated.
However, a small group of scientists, conservationists, and zookeepers stayed focused on saving the species. They worked with the few remaining horses scattered across zoos in countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and the United States. It was a tough task. At one point, the entire global population came from just 12 horses. That meant genetic diversity was dangerously low.
A new female Przewalski's horse was born at the El Paso Zoo this week. The newborn filly already has a strong bond with her mother.
Every birth had to be carefully managed, and every decision was critical. One wrong move could wipe out the entire recovery effort. But they didn't stop. Breeding continued, slowly but steadily. Over the years, the number of horses began to rise. Why did this particular horse matter so much? The Przewalski's horse is the last truly wild horse on Earth. It was never domesticated, never trained to carry people or pull carts. It's built differently too, shorter, stockier, with a thick neck and a stiff, upright mane. Its coat is a dusty tan with dark legs and a black stripe down its back, giving it a look that seems frozen in time. And that's fitting, because ancient cave paintings, some more than 20,000 years old, show animals that look exactly like it.
It's their first taste of freedom. Researchers are releasing several Przewalski horses into the wild.
By the early 2000s, the efforts paid off. Those few zoo horses had offspring, and those offspring had more. The population grew to the point where hundreds were alive and ready to return to the wild.
Wild horses serve another important role, especially for the steppe.
The plan to bring them home. After the Przewalski's horse was pulled back from the brink of extinction, the next challenge was even bigger. Could these animals ever live wild again? It's one thing to save a species inside zoos, but quite another to return it to the wild. Scientists and conservation teams understood that releasing animals raised in captivity comes with serious risks. Some might not know how to find food, others might struggle to avoid predators. And most importantly, the world outside wasn't the same one their ancestors had known. Still, they believed the effort was worth it. A step-by-step plan was created, carefully thought out. The first part was choosing which horses to release. Not all were suitable. Only the strongest, healthiest animals made the list, ones that could handle the harsh climate and unpredictable terrain. The idea was to release just a few horses at a time and closely monitor what happened next. Then they picked a location. One of the first major sites chosen was the Kalamili Nature Reserve, located in Xinjiang, northwest China. It was remote, large, and wild, perfect for a fresh start. But before these horses could be released, they had to be prepared. Even though they were wild by nature, generations in captivity had dulled some of their instincts. So, the horses were moved to huge, fenced-off areas, far bigger than anything they'd experienced in zoos. These spaces gave them room to run, graze, and form natural herds again. Human interaction was kept to a minimum. The goal was to make them as independent as possible. Scientists even described it as school for wild horses. To keep track of their progress once released, many of the horses were fitted with special tracking collars. These devices sent location data back to teams of researchers, who could then monitor how the animals were doing without interfering. They tracked where the horses traveled, how they grouped, and whether they were eating and drinking enough. But the focus wasn't only on the horses. Scientists also studied the land itself.
Do not need to be written, you know. They don't need us. They are independent, happy to be independent.
They asked tough questions. Were there enough food sources? Was the area safe from too much human activity? Could predators become a problem? Did the land have the right balance to support a new wild herd? Nothing was left to chance. The goal wasn't just to release the horses. It was to give them every opportunity to truly survive. The first small group was released in the early 2000s. Everyone involved watched anxiously. But when the horses started behaving like their ancestors, forming herds, finding water, adapting to their environment, it became clear that the project had real potential. More horses followed, more areas were selected for release. And with every new step, the team learned something important: what the horses preferred to eat, how far they liked to roam, and how they responded to harsh winters or heat waves. And this effort didn't belong to one country alone. It was a global collaboration. Countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and others that had protected the species in their zoos sent horses to join the rewilding effort. What had started as a last-ditch conservation attempt slowly transformed into a worldwide mission to bring these wild horses home.
We managed to get those horses here alive and healthy all the way to this reintroduction center.
Why they chose China's harsh desert. Of all the places to bring back a nearly extinct horse, a desert might seem like the worst option. Dry land, scarce food, little water, and extreme temperatures that swing from blistering heat during the day to bitter cold at night. It doesn't exactly sound like a safe haven for a fragile species. But for the Przewalski's horse, that harsh environment might be exactly what it needs to thrive. The Przewalski's horse is built for tough conditions. With its short, muscular body, thick neck, and wide, sturdy hooves, it was made to move across dry plains and rocky hills. Its ancestors didn't live in lush forests or rich pastures. They survived in open, unforgiving landscapes, places where few other animals could last. That's why scientists focused on the Kalamili Nature Reserve in Xinjiang, northwest China. This isn't a soft green paradise. It's rugged land, dry, dusty, covered in scrub and stones and shaped by strong winds. But what it lacks in comfort, it makes up for in something just as important: isolation. There are no busy cities nearby, no highways or industrial noise, just space. wide, open, wild space. And that's what the Przewalski's horse needs most of all. Another key factor was water. While Kalamyli is considered a desert, it's not completely dry. Scattered across the reserve are natural springs and small watering holes. They're not easy to find, but the horses eventually learned how. In fact, they showed behaviors that likely go back thousands of years, using their hooves to dig into the soil and uncover moisture hidden beneath the surface. Predators were also a consideration. In a place like this, there are fewer large predators. No wolf packs hunting through forests. No big cats lurking in the shadows. That gave the reintroduced herds a better shot at survival, especially for the young ones. It allowed foals time to grow stronger and learn how to navigate the land. And as for the brutal weather, temperatures reaching over 40 degrees Celsius in the summer and plunging below minus 30 degrees Celsius in the winter, oddly enough, that worked in the horses' favor too. These conditions aren't comfortable, but they act as a natural barrier. They keep people out. They prevent the land from being overdeveloped or overused. The harsher the environment, the more likely it is to stay wild. So no, the desert wasn't chosen because it was easy. It was chosen because it was real, because it resembled the kind of place where this species evolved and survived for thousands of years.
These Przewalski's horses are the first of their kind to gallop the vast steppes of Kazakhstan in nearly 2 centuries.
The release that made history. After years of preparation, careful breeding, and tireless effort, the moment everyone had been working toward finally arrived. A group of Przewalski's horses, once believed to be completely lost to the wild, were about to be released into the open landscapes of China. The release happened in May 2024. 18 horses had been selected for this round. Each one had been raised in large enclosures where they learned how to live without relying on humans. They were strong, healthy, and ready to take the next step toward true freedom. Getting them there was no small task. Transporting wild animals over long distances is always complicated and risky. The horses were moved carefully, one at a time, in specially designed trailers that allowed them to stand safely and stay calm during the journey. Some of them came from other areas within China, while others had been born and raised in zoo-based breeding programs. When the trailers pulled up to the release site, a group of scientists, conservation workers, and local officials were already waiting. Some had spent years working on this exact project. Others were new faces. But everyone there understood the significance of the moment. It had been over half a century since wild Przewalski's horses had roamed this land. That was about to change. One by one, the horses were carefully unloaded. They stepped out onto the dry earth and looked around, ears alert, muscles tense but steady. All around them was open space, no walls, no cages, no barriers, just land. And then they began to move. At first it was slow, just a few steps, cautious and curious. Then a steady trot, and then suddenly the entire group broke into a gallop. They ran together across the open reserve, kicking up dust, manes flying in the wind, hooves pounding the earth. The people watching didn't say much. A few clapped, some smiled quietly. It was more than just a successful animal release. To see a species that had vanished from the wild return to its rightful place, running strong and free again, it left people speechless. News outlets covered the story. Videos and photos spread online. But for those who were there, no image could capture what it really felt like. In that moment, it wasn't about numbers or reports. It was about watching something wild come back to life. And it proved that with enough time and care, nature can heal. What happened next shocked everyone. At first, no one expected the transition to go smoothly. These horses had spent their entire lives under human care. Even though they had been slowly trained to rely less on people, no one could say for sure what would happen once they were out on their own. No fences, no shelter, no one bringing them food. Scientists braced for the worst. Injuries, confusion, maybe even early deaths. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. Instead of falling apart, the horses adapted, and fast. Within just a few days, they began behaving like a true wild herd. The lead stallion naturally took charge, guiding the group forward. Younger horses followed his lead. When they rested, they huddled in tight circles, rotating shifts to keep watch. No one had taught them this. It was instinct kicking back in the moment they were given freedom. That alone would have been impressive, but it didn't stop there. The scientists tracking the herd by GPS expected them to linger near the release site for at least a few weeks.
Quite important to have these wild horses in the central Kazakhstan because we have not many ungulates. We have a lot of saiga.
That's what reintroduced animals usually do. They stay in familiar territory until they figure things out. But these horses had other ideas. Within 2 days, they had already traveled several kilometers from where they were released. By the end of the week, they'd covered rocky hills, dry valleys, and even moved through zones with no water in sight. The biggest surprise came when they located water on their own. Researchers had expected to assist them, or at least guide them toward hidden springs. But the horses didn't wait. They used their hooves to dig into dry soil and exposed shallow sources of water. Even more incredible, some of them led the herd to spots that had been dry and untouched for years, places where their ancestors had once drunk. And they weren't just getting by. They were thriving. The horses found ways to graze on sparse desert grass. They avoided dangerous terrain. They dust-bathed under the sun and rolled in the sand to cool off, just like their wild ancestors had. They picked the best places to rest and moved with the rhythm of the land. Even seasoned biologists were stunned.
My favorite of the two is equine nutrition. Definitely interesting to learn about their diets and how to apply it to.
One who had spent years studying wild horse behavior reportedly said, "It's like they never forgot. The wild was always there, just waiting for a chance to wake up." What had started as a cautious test quickly became something much bigger. Footage of the horses running through the desert, strong, free, completely at home, began circulating online. People around the world were amazed. Even some of the scientists could hardly believe what they were seeing. They changed the ecosystem. In the beginning, all attention was on the horses. Were they finding food? Were they adapting? Were they safe out in the open? For the first few months, that was all anyone cared about. But then, something unexpected began to unfold. Slowly and quietly, the land itself started to change. The return of the horses wasn't just affecting their survival. It was reshaping the desert around them. It began with the grass. In sections of the reserve that had been bare for years, small patches of grass started growing again. These weren't lush meadows, but in a dry landscape, even a little green was a big deal.
It's not that it's just about impacting and saving this species. It's about protecting this ecosystem and restoring the biodiversity of the system.
The horses didn't stay in one place. They kept moving, grazing here, walking there, which meant no single area got worn down too much. As they moved, their hooves broke up the dry, compacted soil. Their manure added nutrients. That constant activity helped the ground breathe again and gave seeds a better chance to grow. Then came the insects. With grass returning and the soil improving, bugs began to reappear. Beetles, ants, and other insects showed up in places where there had been hardly any before. They helped break down organic material, spread seeds, and enrich the soil even further. It created a natural chain reaction. Horses supported plant life, plants supported insects, and insects supported everything else. Soon after, the birds came back. Species that hadn't been seen in the area for years began showing up. Some nested in the new shrubs. Others hunted the returning insects. A few may have already been nearby, just waiting for the right conditions to return. Others may have come from distant regions, drawn by the subtle shift in the ecosystem. Either way, the skies and the shrubs began to stir with movement. Even the water holes improved. When the horses dug around the edges of springs or kicked at dry spots, they loosened the earth, making it easier for water to pool. Shallow basins formed where animals could drink. These new water points weren't just used by the horses. Wild goats, foxes, and even rare small deer were spotted coming in for a drink.
Now we are pleased to return those wonderful horses to its indigenous place of living.
Camera traps caught glimpses of this growing community, and every sighting was another piece of proof that things were changing. Soon it wasn't just about the horses thriving. The entire area was beginning to come back to life. More plants, more bugs, more birds, more animals. The desert didn't suddenly turn into a forest, but it was clearly shifting. The land was recovering, not through force or engineering, but through a natural chain of events sparked by the return of a single species. What shocked the scientists most was how quickly the transformation began. They had hoped the horses would adapt to the land. What they didn't expect was that the land would start responding to the horses. One researcher put it perfectly. It's like they brought the past with them, not just themselves, but the balance this land used to have. Birth in the wild. One morning in April 2025, something happened that made every scientist, ranger, and conservation worker stop in their tracks. Deep within the Helen Mountain Nature Reserve in China's Ningxia region, a baby Przewalski's horse was seen standing on its wobbly legs, alive, healthy, and only a few hours old. It was the first wild birth of this species in that area, and it was far more than just a heartwarming sight.
They were facing a lot of challenges, and they reached out to us to get involved in satellite tracking the horses, which is a great way to be able to learn quickly about their ecology, what their habitat needs are.
It was undeniable proof that the entire rewilding project was working. The horses weren't just surviving in the wild, they were building a future. They were reproducing naturally, without intervention, in a land that had once been considered too damaged and too risky for a comeback. That tiny foal meant the environment wasn't just livable, it was strong enough to raise the next generation. The mother was one of 5 mares released into the reserve just months earlier. She had received no medical help, no supervision. There were no fences, no stalls, no safety nets. That foal was born as it would have been 100 years ago, beneath open skies on raw earth in the middle of the wild. The mother stayed close, shielding her baby from the wind and never straying far as the herd slowly moved over the hills. On the second day, the foal began walking. Within days, it was running short distances, clumsily at first, but gaining strength with each step. This rapid learning is critical in the wild. Foals have to be up and moving fast if they want to keep up and survive. Even though this was expected, seeing it happen in real time, without human help, felt nothing short of incredible. Camera traps and GPS trackers confirmed the birth. Word spread quickly. Scientists and wildlife groups across the globe celebrated. It wasn't just a success for China. It was a moment of triumph for every country, every zoo, and every team that had spent years working to save the Przewalski's horse from extinction. Many experts were caught off guard. The first group of horses had only arrived in Helen Mountain in late 2024.
This data to understand better the process of horse domestication and beyond horse domestication, the process of animal domestication as a whole.
No one expected wild births so soon, but there it was, a newborn foal, already exploring its new home, completely untouched by human hands. People often talk about things coming full circle, and this was exactly that. Genetic revelation. Back in 2018, a group of scientists led by evolutionary biologist Ludovic Orlando made a discovery that caught everyone in the conservation world off guard. On the surface, it didn't sound like a huge deal. They collected bone samples from 42 ancient horses and compared their DNA with that of modern horses found in places like Mongolia, China, and Europe. Pretty standard stuff in genetics. But what they uncovered flipped a long-held belief on its head. For years, people had believed that Przewalski's horses, the stocky, tan ones with stiff, upright manes, were the last truly wild horses left on the planet. as in never domesticated, never tamed by humans. But the DNA said otherwise. These horses didn't come from untouched wild stock. They were actually descendants of domesticated horses raised by the Botai people in northern Kazakhstan about 5,000 years ago. In other words, they weren't as wild as everyone thought. When the findings hit the headlines, the reaction was intense.
And try to help them have a more natural life. Horses do not need to be ridden, you know. They don't need us. They are independent.
Some people panicked. There were real concerns that this would take the shine off conservation efforts. Would funders pull out? Would people stop caring? If these horses were just the descendants of once domesticated animals, what was the point of saving them? But the people who had been working in the field for years didn't panic. Their reaction was simple. So what? They argued that what really matters isn't just where the horses came from, but how they live now. And today, Przewalski's horses live like wild animals, roaming freely, surviving harsh conditions, and managing just fine without human help. That's what counts. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, which helps decide which species are endangered, didn't drop them from the list. Instead, they asked scientists to keep researching and learn more before drawing big conclusions. That's when researchers in China stepped up. At the Xinjiang University Genomics Center, a team of scientists dug deeper into the genetics of the wild Przewalski's horses living in the Kalamyli Nature Reserve. This time, they didn't just look at fragments. They studied entire chromosomes, big sections of the genetic code, to get a more complete picture. What they found was actually pretty exciting. First off, the horses had a nucleotide diversity score of 0.25. That number might not mean much to most people, but in genetic terms, it's good news. It shows a healthy level of genetic variation, similar to what you'd find in wild zebras. In fact, it's even better than what exists in some breeds of domestic dogs. They also looked at mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed down from mothers. The results showed 6 separate maternal lines.
These are the last known truly wild horses, as in they're not domesticated.
That's important because it means early breeders didn't accidentally create a genetic bottleneck by over-relying on just 1 or 2 females. A narrow gene pool can cause serious problems down the line, but that didn't happen here. The team didn't stop there. They examined the horses' immune systems too. Out in the desert, these animals have to deal with biting flies and disease-carrying ticks. So, researchers checked their major histocompatibility complex, MHC genes. These are the genes that help the immune system fight off infections. Most domestic horses carry around 8 different MHC gene variants. The Przewalski's horses in Kalamyli had 12. That added diversity gives them a stronger chance of resisting dangerous diseases like pyroplasmosis, a blood infection spread by ticks that often hits domestic horses hard in desert environments. And there was more. Researchers also looked at how these horses process food. Surviving in places like Kalamyli isn't just about staying disease-free. It's also about being able to live off sparse, dry, low-nutrition plants. Their genes showed clear signs of adaptation. These horses have evolved to make the most of what little food the land offers. So yes, maybe they don't fit the textbook definition of never domesticated wild animals. But that doesn't change what they are now. They live independently. They survive in tough environments. They're not pampered or protected by humans. By almost every measure that counts, they're wild. And that's the takeaway here. Labels like wild or domestic don't always tell the full story. What matters is how a species lives in the present, how it fits into its ecosystem, how it adapts, and how it survives. And by that standard, the Przewalski's horse is as wild as they come. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in our next video.